Monday, July 28th. I'm Adam Walsh, and this is The Signal. Today on the show, a couple of things, folks. Up first, we're talking wildfires in this province and potential climate change impacts. Then, an intergenerational climate change discussion. We've got 4 climate advocates here in studio for a big old chat. No, there's been no shortage of discussion nationally and provincially this summer when it comes to wildfires. We've had homes lost, cabins lost. There's a lot that's been in the news. And we're going to get some details on this. A little note on me that I haven't mentioned on the show yet. I've mentioned in other places with CBC-NL. I'm currently studying climate change with the Oxford Climate Journalism Network, me and 99 other journalists from around the world. As we learn together, one of the things that came up is from the World Weather Attribution. So these are folks whose job it is, they have climate models. They try to understand how climate change influences the intensity and likelihood of extreme weather events. So, for example, a heat wave. Here's what they have to say. Every heat wave in the world is now made stronger and more likely to happen because of human-caused climate change. They say, for reporters like me, journalists like me, they say don't be too cautious. Heat waves are unilaterally linked to global warming. So there's that. When it comes to wildfires, there's more nuance. Fire weather is increasing in parts of all continents, they say, with clear attributable increases in both probability and total burned area in southern Europe, northern Eurasia, the U.S., Australia, some evidence in southern China. Human activities, such as forest management and ignition sources, are important factors. Data records of fires are very limited in some areas, making attribution, in some cases, challenging. So with this in my head and with the summer that we're living through, I wanted to get in touch with someone to give us some context, some perspective around it. So for a local Newfoundland and Labrador look at things, joining us on the line from, I believe, Cowhead, André Arsenault, a forest ecologist, Natural Resources Canada, Canadian Forest Service, Atlantic Forestry Center. Hello, how you doing?
Hello, Adam. I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. Thanks for taking time. I know you're off today in Cowhead, typically in Corner Brook. Thanks for taking time for a brief discussion. Can you give us an overall, when we look at Newfoundland and Labrador and the types of forests we have, like what historically do we know about wildfires, whether it's the island and also some of what you know about Labrador?
So the province of Newfoundland and Labrador is part of the boreal forest, and fire is a key component in the boreal forest. But for the island in particular, and parts of Labrador, although there's some variation between one part and the other, fire frequency has been a lot less frequent here compared to, say, Western Canada. So numbers we have from the island for the last century, you're looking at the fire cycle about 700 years, which is longer than by about 7 times compared to Western Canada. Now, there's some important differences between Labrador and Newfoundland. Most of the fires here over the last century have actually been started by humans, while in Labrador, it's mostly been by lightning. But still, the frequency overall is a lot less here than other parts of the country. And if you look at an overall map of all the fires that we know have burnt across the country, you can see a lot out west and not that many here in Newfoundland. And, a lot of that is related to climate. People sometimes refer to the island as a boreal rainforest. So things you need for fire are fuels and things that start lightning, and we have lots of fuel here, but you need weather to dry those fuels. And like now, for example, here would be really hard even to start a campfire in Cowhead.
Mm. Yeah, and I was looking because I looked through a couple of your papers. Thank you for sending them, by the way. I was looking through them this morning, and it is like in one of the points you have, right? So for Newfoundland, average annual temperature 5 degrees Celsius, 1,400 millimeters of annual precipitation, right? This it can be a wet, cold place. The ocean's just right there. But now let's factor in climate change for a second, and this world that is hotter and it can be drier, especially if you look at the summer and what's been going on now. What should we be thinking about and looking at when it comes to climate change and wildfires, whether it's the lightning strikes in Labrador or also the person-started ones, given conditions that could be perhaps are drier and hotter, especially like in the central part of the island?
Yes, like you were mentioning in the introduction, attribution sometimes can be a little bit tricky in terms of climate change. And certainly, any single event, it's very difficult to say it's climate change or not. But the trends are clear. If you look in Canada, from the big fire year we had in 2023, 2024 with the Jasper fire, and then 2025 now looks like it's going to be the second largest wildfire season on record after 2023. So the trends are quite clear. What's happening with climate change is that we have a lengthening of the fire season. So the fires start earlier in the spring and go later in the fall. We have more drought conditions that are more prolonged, and we also have very hot temperatures, like we had this summer in Newfoundland when the Bonavista fire started, and all of these factors together contribute to making our forest more predisposed to wildfire. Now, this is very obvious in Western Canada. It's a bit less obvious here, although when you look at the trend we had with the Western Labrador fire last year and the fires on the island this year, definitely it does fit the trend that we're seeing climate change have an effect. And on the island, for example, I do quite a bit of skiing, and you can tell there's the last few years we had below average snowpack, which affects the whole hydrology of the island. So that affects salmon rivers, but it also makes the fuel drier in the spring. So we have a period in the spring when often you have these wildfires that are started by people burning brush after the snow melt and before the big rains come. And that can be tricky because if you have these drought conditions, then these fires can really take off. So it's really important to listen to the provincial guidelines about safety.
So then, André, before I let you go, what's something people should, for Newfoundland and Labrador, Newfoundlanders and Labradorians, how should our thinking evolve when it comes to what we're seeing?
So, the thing that worries me about when I look at in Newfoundland is especially cabin country. So you look, north of St. John's, you have a lot of communities where people obviously have not thought about fire. And so those communities, it's really important to start thinking about how you manage your property so that it's less susceptible to fire, and making sure all communities should have, preparedness, like escape routes and that sort of thing. But the other thing is prevention. Don't throw the cigarettes out the car window, and, even people using ATVs, making sure they're clean of vegetation. Because if it's really dry, it's really easy for, the hot muffler to start a grass fire. Yeah.
And so much Newfoundland and Labrador spent outdoors, connected to nature, but with that comes risk. And if you're not careful, the cigarette butt thing should be a no-brainer, obviously, but it's the important messaging.
Yes.
André, thank you so much for enjoy the rest of your time now off in Cowhead.
Oh, my pleasure. Take care.
All right. André Arsenault there, forest ecologist, Natural Resources Canada, Canadian Forest Service, Atlantic Forestry Centre. Folks, thoughts on what André had to say? The Signal at cbc.ca. Part two of the show now, that, like I said, there'd be kind of two different bits, right? So we talked about, I wanted that information in, some extra context around wildfires as we march forward with this show and the climate coverage we're doing. We're spending the rest of the hour having an intergenerational climate change discussion with 4 climate advocates / activists. Each might have a different thought on how they're defined here. As I was getting ready for today's show, I was looking through some headlines, right? David Suzuki, right, environmentalist. Everyone, I kind of don't even need to say who he is in Canada. Earlier this month, quoted in iPolitics saying, "It's too late. The fight against climate change is lost." Clarified it a bit with CBC in a follow-up interview saying, well, that's through the legal, political, economic systems. We need to focus on community action. Last week, hailed as a planetary-scale win for climate advocates pushing for stronger action against carbon pollution, the International Court of Justice declared nations have an obligation under international law to prevent climate change and that they may be liable to pay compensation if they fail to do so. Also, you had the head of the United Nations. We've got some tape here. It's about a minute. Take a listen to this.
Renewables already nearly match fossil fuels in global installed power capacity. And that's just the beginning. Last year, almost all the new power capacity built came from renewables. And every continent on Earth added more renewables capacity than fossil fuels. The clean energy future is no longer a promise, it's a fact. No government, no industry, no special interest can stop it. Of course, the fossil fuel lobby of some fossil fuel companies will try, and we know the lengths to which they will go. But I have never been more confident that they will fail because we have passed the point of no return.
Antonio Guterres there, Secretary General of the United Nations. And in that speech, he said 2023 alone, clean energy sectors drove 10% of global GDP growth, 5% India, United States 6%, China, a leader in the energy transition, 20%, and in the European Union, nearly 33%. Then Mr. Guterres X'd or tweeted, however you say it now, just yesterday, the renewable energy transition is unstoppable, but it's not yet fast or fair enough. Let's build a future that's not only green, but just, not only fast, but fair, not only transformative, but inclusive. The new energy era must deliver equity, dignity, and opportunity for all. So that's setting the stage. That's setting the stage for the rest of the show. And I know we're talking broad here, and some of this might go into hyper-local, but that's the world we're living in, isn't it? Trying to think of what to do, how to do things around climate change. My four guests here in the studio, Megs Scott is here, co-president, Fridays for Future. Welcome back.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Leah Casey is here, climate advocate, and where are you working right now again?
I'm working at the Petty Harbor Mini Aquarium this summer, so learning lots there.
Yeah, excellent. Sister Marie T is here, former director of the Mercy Center for Ecology and Justice, but retired now. How are you doing?
Very good, and thank you very much.
So you're freelancing on climate now, is it?
More or less,
More
yes.
or less, all right. And last but not least, someone else who, on this show, you don't really need an introduction at all, Mr. Whitaker. Dick Whitaker is here, climate advocate, Portugal Cove, St. Phillips. How you doing, sir?
Oh, I'm hanging in there, but I can only tell you I'm so disappointed in the province. I just read their mitigation program. It's pitiful, you know, and that sort of thing. And the highest level of production of problems here is transportation, 40% or something of greenhouse gas. And here we are, almost the electrical capital of Canada. How is that possible? We should be driving electric vehicles and so on, driving ourselves towards that as much as we can. We can't do it all at once, obviously, but we're not doing very much.
You know, you say that. I've got a request in for the Minister of Environment and Climate Change, the Scott Reid. I'm waiting to hear back on availability because my request is to sit down for an hour to talk about both the adaptation and mitigation plans for Newfoundland and Labrador. So when I hear back, I will let you know, and then I will ask you for your notes on what you thought of it. So jumping off from what Mr. Whitaker was saying, right? This time. So that's a provincial thought on it. But this time and place that we're in right now, we heard those headlines that I mentioned. We heard the head of the UN. Megs, like for an activist, right, and someone who's studying this, right, and who's someone who's eyes and ears into it. What are your thoughts on where we are right now?
I think we're nearing a point, like you said, a point of no return, where people are realizing that a just transition is going to be the most effective way of getting through this, but people are also noticing that it's not happening fast enough. One thing that a lot of local activists are calling for is a just transition within Newfoundland and Labrador, and another group that we work with a lot is the Youth Climate Corps, which is completely about making just transition and green and renewable jobs for youth. So I think there's a lot of community organizing happening, and I think there's a lot of people pushing for work against climate change.
And you've been on the show before, but remind folks a bit about your background and 'cause you're from the west coast of the island, and go on.
Yeah, so I'm from Port aux Basques. I really got into climate activism after Hurricane Fiona hit,
Yeah.
because I just saw the destruction that it brought to my town. And when I moved to St. John's, I became part of Fridays for Future. I came to one of their climate strikes, and I just fell in love with their work. And since then, I've become co-president, and I'm actually a marine bio master's student now, working on my thesis on conservation of sea cucumbers. So yeah, it's very much working around not only climate justice, but also social justice, and making sure that I'm intertwining all of my activism into one, so that I'm standing for multiple things at once.
And it's all, yeah. And for you, the building blocks of who you are, how you are, what you're learning, the activism, the education side, and the education you're getting from the activism all together for
All
climate
together.
change.
Yep.
Leah Casey, what about yourself?
I am always trying to take a positive look at it.
Yeah,
I think there's so much good happening around the world and within our communities specifically. So I'm really hopeful about what's happening. But also, we can see all on social media, on the radio, on the news, there's terrible things happening throughout the world. So we need to stay positive, but also keep in mind that there's real consequences happening to real people. And so we need action to happen, and we need real big change.
I think it was a year ago you were in the news with us for, you were one of 20 winners across the country to win a TD scholarship for community leadership. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so that was, I mean, it's an amazing opportunity that I'm obviously still benefiting from. I won that scholarship last year as I was graduating high school, primarily for my work in community involvement. So I'm like in community gardens where I'm from in CBS, and local parks and stuff like that. And so that's how I kind of make small municipal change, helping people with food insecurity, which obviously is a effect of climate change, or giving people green spaces. It's all really important to me. And so I was given that award because of that sort of work. And that's given me so many opportunities, like going to school to study biology, which I'm doing.
Yeah, it was a $70,000 scholarship, right?
That is true, yeah.
Well, I don't think you could be told congrats enough around that. So congrats again a year later on that. Sister Mary, what about yourself? This time and place, and then a bit of background.
Okay. Well, you were just playing, speaking with about Gustavo Gutierrez. And it's amazing how he was saying the other day how with the forest fires and so on, that we're now living in the fires of hell, he said.
Yeah.
You know, to jolts us into a reality. And I think that with regard to what's happening, you know, we have scientific evidence, and we have the scientific knowledge and models for climate change, and we have the policy that's needed. But the depth of change is not there. And I think that's what we all wonder about. So I think that scientific knowledge and the knowledge of technology is not sufficient. That there has to be a moral, spiritual way into this, because we have to have a change in consciousness. And I don't think rules and regulations will bring that about. It has to be more than the intelligent part of us. It has to be tapping to our very hearts and our feelings. And I think if we were in that direction, coupled with the scientific and technology information, that probably we'd have a better way of entering into a more substantial change.
So how do we, tapping into that, how do we get there with that? How do we, because we have all this talk of climate change and, like you said, rules and regulations and meeting the spirit of, like, the Paris agreements and that kind of a thing. But if we're talking about something in here, and that not enough people are feeling it. How do we change that, Mr. Whitaker?
Well, it's very, very difficult, obviously. I mean, we're going through, I think, one of the most selfish ages that you could possibly imagine. You know, it's all about me, me, me. Look at me and my bigger vehicle, my bigger this, that, and the other. You don't need it. One person in the vehicle, hello? You know, that kind of thing. Then loading it up with all the goods and bits and pieces of the ATVs and whatever. And, you know, it just multiplies and multiplies and multiplies. And it's all about look at me. Houses, 2 people living in a house that historically would have housed 20. What's that about, you know? So we're greedy. We're not we're self-centered and that kind of thing. We don't realize that we're part of a whole, or don't act as if we're part of a whole and we have a responsibility to the whole. And I agree with your sister, but how do you make it happen? I mean, I'm doing my bit as best I can, and so are my children, by the way, which I'm very happy to say. But then you see in St. John's, and everybody delighted because these cruise ships are coming in. Hello, they're part of the problem. They're, you know, the amount of greenhouse gas they emit is enormous. And what's it about? It's all about me, isn't it?
Similar to when you see the super yachts too, right? Like
yeah.
a super yacht, those things for the climate side of it,
Yep.
Really bad.
Yeah, exactly. And it's all over the place. People use speedboats to go out to fish for lobsters. They can do the same job with a very low horsepower diesel engine and consume about 1/10 of the fuel. Those kinds of things. And I don't know, you know, I mean, this was done historically and just as successfully as today. So I don't know what, you know, where we're at. Our heads are firmly buried in the sand, I think.
So we've talked spirituality and needing to move things. Mr. Whitaker, we're in a time of greediness, which, you know, you can look around, and there's great points there. So who else wants to weigh in?
I think, yes, individualism is big right now, and standing up for yourself is like the most important thing to most people. But I think being involved in the community we have here in St. John's gives me hope that there are people who don't think that way, especially younger people that are running away from it and saying, hey, we need to rebuild community. We need to rebuild work that we do together. Like we held a climate town hall before the last federal election. So we had people coming in and asking their candidates questions that mattered to them. So I think it's coming together and working on things locally and then moving that towards provincially, then federally, then internationally. Like, look at Fridays for Future. It was Greta Thunberg that started this all just by protesting on Fridays.
Yeah.
And look at it now. Like, we have annual strikes. We meet with government officials. We are international. So I'm in contact with people in India. I'm in contact with people across the world with Fridays for Future. And I think it's a movement that people forget about very often, even though it's very much in your face. And we can see what's happening with climate action and climate change. And I think as well, people aren't paying attention because they're too obsessed with their phones and what's happening online and what's happening in celebrities' lives. But we need to pull away from that, and instead of essentially like idolizing these humans that just happen to have more money than us and are actually one of the biggest drivers in climate change because of their private jets, we need to focus on what we can do locally. And like Leah said, working together and doing like gardens and working together for food insecurity. And if you know a neighbor that's going through something tough, working together. So I think it's all about community right now and moving towards that. So as long as we're working towards building a stronger community and building capacity in community, which is one thing that I've been working on a lot. It's, mentoring younger people to work in climate action. and then being a mentee to people who are older than you to learn new things. I think it's building community is just as important as working towards the change.
Leah?
I don't disagree with what you were saying. I think that fundamentally very accurate, especially younger people. We see what other people have and we want the same. But I think it's a lot more complex than that. And I fundamentally disagree with placing blame on individual people for climate change. I think it's systems that have been built and structures that people can't get away from that have put them in positions to have to rely on things like maybe they want to go out and they want to go in their fast speedboat to get fish because that's the only option to them. Maybe they don't have options to have green energy motors. I don't know. It's stuff like that. Systems are not made for people to make better choices at this point in time.
So, for example, and I've talked about this on the show before too, if I walk into a box store, it doesn't matter which one, or any type of, for shopping, I'm going to be surrounded by a sea of plastic. Now, to get the non-plastic option, it might be more expensive. It may not be available. But that's like on the system side of it. Yeah. That's part of that, I think.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that what Megs was saying is so correct. We need to focus on the communities and building these structures that support people, but we can't forget that we're living in a system that was created to benefit off people, like our earth being polluted. Mm-hmm. We need those changes on a large scale, and I don't think that we can discredit that.
And I'll let you obviously speak for yourself, Mr. Whitaker. But on your point too, though, when I think of, yes, individuals, fine, but when it comes to voting and change, where does that come? That's from individuals together.
Yeah.
And eventually with democracy and community, exactly, tying that together in a time of loads of self-indulgence, right? With our apps, with our social media, with everything else, and in a time when that commercialism is still rampant. And we still walk into places that have a sea of plastic in front of us, and also wondering, how are we doing with the transition to electric as opposed to from gas-driven vehicles and those types of things.
I hate to disagree with you.
It's completely okay.
But it does come down to individual choice. You're making up your mind as to whether you're going to be consciously thinking about what you're doing to the world around you, to the children, or the younger people like yourselves. And if you choose to build a house that's 3 times as big as you need, what for? It all consumes huge amounts of energy to do that, and then a large amount after that to keep it heated in the winter and cool in the summer and all this kind of stuff. It does come down to individual choice as well as the other. And I'll pick up on one of your points there. We have 2 elections coming up, municipal and provincial. And we need to really put these issues front and center and make people answer them. The candidates for whichever level of government they're going for, and follow it up. And I'm already doing some of that because that's a very useful little booklet. I'm hoping to get one of those in every one of the mayors and municipalities' paper, when they have their meeting after the election and this kind of stuff. I'm working with the group that wrote that. It's a good little document, very useful, it's to the point. But I want it on the table before the election.
Yeah, and this document, the booklet you're talking about, it's also, because you showed me when you stopped in on Friday to prepare for the show, we're talking, this is a booklet document that to help with even the education side for especially on the municipal level, for councillor hopefuls and those who get in to get a better understanding of on the climate front, right?
Absolutely, yeah. It's pretty straightforward. It's easy reading, it's not too hard, but the facts are in there. And it was done in 2009, so it's being revised by the group that did this in the first place. And we've just got to get down to it. We haven't got the time to muck around and hope that it'll happen.
No, and this is democracy. This is the push for, and also trying to ensure more people are kind of tooled up when it comes to understanding climate change, right? And trying to get people to kind of increase their knowledge. So this is like when it comes to Fridays for Future, right? What's it like talking? Like, there's the younger crowd, like of your age and younger, who might have a certain understanding, and then there's other folks that maybe there's more gaps around climate understanding. What do you find for the work you're doing in talking to folks about those levels and trying to kind of spread the word if it needs to be spread?
So one thing we've been trying to do a lot of school talks to talk with younger students. We try to make radio appearances because we know that typically it's not the younger generation listening to the radio.
Yes, that tracks.
Yep.
I'll just say for my seat.
Yep. But we also do petitions and we try to get our asks out. So like we have 5 asks right now for the provincial government.
Yeah.
We ask that the government of Newfoundland and Labrador declares a climate emergency. St. John's has. Newfoundland needs one. And Labrador needs one. We ask that government of Newfoundland and Labrador invest substantially in public transit infrastructures province-wide. So not just metro region, in other places as well. We ask that they cease subsidies for oil and gas companies. They're making enough money as it is. We could be putting that money elsewhere, like into the housing crisis, food instability, all that kind of stuff. We ask for provincial legislation that bans advertising for oil and gas companies. Why are we trying to put people into a dying work field that is actively harming the planet when we could be pushing for a just transition, training people that are working at oil and gas fields to be within the work field for a greener transition? And our last one is that they divest from entities investing in ecocide and genocide.
Thank you for those. Anyone with Sister Mary, thoughts?
Yes, at the Mercy Centre for Ecology and Justice, we worked in similar programs. And, one of the things, in talking with Mr. Whitaker there, we're in a society that's really a throwaway society.
Yeah.
So when you spoke about plastics, what does it mean to throw away? Where is away? We throw the plastics away, but they probably end up in the water source, in the oceans, and the fish are eating those microplastics, and we're eating the fish. So we're eating the plastics back, bringing it back into our bodies. So, we have to look at our connections and how we're interconnected, interrelated, and interdependent. These are the principles by which we live by. And at the Mercy Centre for Ecology and Justice, we did programs with the garden, and we did recycling programs, and we did programs with youth and with smaller children, and we had summer camps. And we had many activities to connect with the environment, to make that human connection. And one program we spoke about was the New Universe story, which connects the story of creation, the biblical story, with the scientific story. And we had a cosmic walk of 23 moments of evolution, beginning right back in 13.8 billion years and up through the present time, through the scientific knowledge that we have at this moment. So I remember in summer camp, we had the children, and Fridays, the parents and the grandparents and people would come, and they would say, the children, we'd have a little party, and the children would tell about what they learned during the week. So this little fella got up and he said, I learned, he said, that I'm not 10 years old, he said, He said, I am 13.8 billion year and 10 years old, he said. And there was because he said, all the atoms and from previous generations and from the soil and the water and the animals are in me. And he started to talk like that, and then he said, I have that same energy. And he said, when I touch my heart, I can feel the twinkling of the stars because I'm made of stardust, And he started to tell all this kind of a story that we had, And so my grandmother was there, and she spoke up and she said, oh, my goodness, and you haven't got even a wrinkle, So it's kind of bringing home who we are in the larger picture. We're not just individuals. We're responsible not just for ourselves, but for a community. And it's that responsibility that, that we have, and we see it, and the interconnectedness. And, Brian Sweeney used to say to me in class, he in California when I was doing my work there, he'd say, the universe is alive in you. You reflect the universe, and he'd often say to me, and to most of us, the stars are our ancestors. And then, these kinds of things, you were once molten rock, but now you're singing opera, So it's bringing home to us who we are, in this universe, not only just on the Earth, but in the universe. And you take the astronauts, when they look back at Earth, what did they see? They say a community. There were no divisions, no separations, they were all one. So it's that kind of a motivation that will have a lasting effect, I think, on us if we kind of understood that broader, connection. And Einstein said to us too that we can't bring about changes. We can't change with the old knowledge and system and ideas that created the problems in the first place. We have to look at a different and a newer way of seeing and acting and being in the world.
Well said. And talking about the astronaut side of it too, it's such when we look at community, and also for the conversation too today, it's a community conversation and a climate change conversation, and it doesn't respect borders either.
No.
Right? Climate change. So when everyone's like, well, what oftentimes I will hear when I'm out and about, like you'll hear blame for developing countries, so you'll be with China and all the emissions that are going out. Historically, United States and Canada and some of what it's put out, but those borders don't matter when it comes to climate change and emissions going out. Like they just don't. It is that one community, and then each different parts of it that can be impacted either more severely or differently depending on where you are on Earth. So what community work needs to happen going forward? Right, because Mr. Whitaker, you're talking about you're pressing politicians, and you've been doing work in Port Cove St. Phillips for a year or two. What else needs to happen?
Well, one of the things that I was just thinking about it, that Canada is one of 3 countries that has actually declared a river in law as a person, and that happened in Quebec. It's the only province in Canada that's happened, as far as I know. But when you start to think about it, perhaps that's what we should do about the environment. Treat it in law as a person and so on, and that government and people have a responsibility to ensure it's looked after like a person, that sort of thing. It's a different way of thinking, but nonetheless, until we recognize that what's around us has its own rights built into it. It doesn't matter if it's an insect or an elephant or whatever, but we need to do that. We need to come round, and that, maybe that should start in school systems talking about things like that a lot more, because I don't know what is done in classes in schools these days. I'm a long while out of touch with that, of course, but perhaps that's where it all starts, and of course even in nursery schools. Perhaps more importantly in nursery schools, because that's when people's lives are actually set at that age, as far as I can tell.
Go ahead.
I think it's all going to come back to the communities.
Yeah.
All of the communities around the world need to work together as one, but also doing their individual work. So like we talked about, there's elections coming up. We all need to work together to make sure that our elected officials are going to support our interests and make sure that there's going to be climate action on a large scale, which is what I always think. I think like the things that Megs had mentioned about like Fridays for Future and their asks, like all of those are such big points that are so important. And so those are the questions we'd be asking politicians when they're running for our elections. So people on the ground need to be doing this work to create the change that we want to see. It's all the communities. They all need to come together.
Yes.
Megs, any other thoughts?
Yeah, I think it, like Leah said, 100% based on communities, community action, but it's also, like you said, based on individual actions. And I think it's as well, like you said, treating the earth as a human in law. And I think as well treating the animals in which in law. And I also think that it's holding the top 1% accountable. It's not just saying, hey, everyone else, make sure that you're using public transportation and that you're using less plastic and yada, yada, yada. When you have people that are like taking 30-minute private jet flights, like Taylor Swift, one of the most famous popular musicians in the world, whenever we do community work, Fridays for Future brings up the fact that like she emits so much carbon dioxide. So much. It's actually ridiculous. And it's for like the shortest flights, and it's really harmful. And instead of like I said, idolizing celebrities, holding them accountable for what they're doing for climate change.
Megs Scott there, co-president of Fridays for Future. Also with me here in the studio, Leah Casey, climate advocate, Richard Whitaker, climate advocate, and regular caller to the show over the years, and Sister Mary T is here as well, former director for the Mercy Center for Ecology and Justice. I'm Adam Walsh. This is The Signal. Today we're talking climate change. If you've got thoughts for us, thesignal@cbc.ca. The text line is open, 709-327-8206. So for both of you who've been at it for a while, when did you start to think more about climate change and how things were going? Like, do you remember an impact point, whether it's the 70s or 80s or 90s or early 2000s? Like, when did you start to really kind of think more? Like, because Sister Mary, I mean, I know you've talked about the spiritual side of it in connection to the earth, but like on the climate bit, when did you really kind of first connect with it?
Well, after I came from Peru, there was a month's retreat out in Saskatoon, and someone suggested to me about it. So I went and I spent a month in Saskatoon.
So what year was this roughly?
That was about 2000 and, let me see now, or about 2006, around there. And the director was a person from a university in California, and the topic was creation spirituality. So I said to myself, I don't know much about that, And when he started talking, and when we got into the program, I realized that that's exactly how I grew up, and I knew all about it, because I grew up next to the ocean, and we didn't have organized sports at that time. And
where'd you grow up to?
In Burn Cove.
There you go. Yeah.
And it was a little community. And we played with the waves in the ocean, catch me if you can, running out after them and coming in. And, after school in the evening, I went with to the garden with my father, and with my father's lunch. He'd be there in the garden, and he'd light a fire for me, and we'd have a cup of tea, and then he'd say to me, just listen. Do you listen to the silence, Did you hear that bird? It's very happy singing, and things like that, So creation spirituality, I identified then. I knew I was part of it, So then I took an early retirement, which strike was on. We didn't have any money, so we got to buy back our pensionable years and so on. So I took it and went to California and did the studies in creation spirituality and culture. And that was mind-boggling. So I came back and the sister said to me, we'd like to have a new ministry. Why don't you start a new ministry? So I was caught then. So we started the Ecology and Justice. But, climate change then wasn't a part of a table conversation or anything like that. It was something that was mentioned probably mostly among scientists and but it was way out there, it was far away, it was in the future. So it was trying to, and the oil business was booming then, starting too, and we were becoming a have-not province. And I mean, how could you talk about a footprint and different lifestyles and all that kind of a thing? So we tapped into the spirituality, the sacredness of all creation, and that's where we started. And then on the West Coast, one of the great successes we had was that I'm sort of went in with other organizations locally, and the fracking was on the West Coast. So we have an NGO office at the United Nations, and we're in 43 countries of the world. So fracking was something that was, being talked about in all these areas. So we had, with our NGO, there were 8 of us from different countries on Zoom. And yes, so we supported, and when they found out that the fracking was going through Grossmorn National Park, a UNESCO heritage site, well, they took it at the UN. So you talk about community, they had worked so hard in community to bring about an awareness about the fracking. Then we had it, and they said they would do, we did an urgent letter of appeal to the UN and presented it. And then we said that, we couldn't talk about governments and not let them know. So we had the UN send an urgent letter of appeal to the federal and provincial governments. And that was a real boost to the committees that were trying to fight against climate change. And we got it all put on hold. So it was wonderful. It was a wonderful community. I think Graham Oliver was there and some of the people, and he said he did 180 workshops or something down the coast trying to educate the people and, be able to have them speak from a knowledgeable point of view with regard to fracking.
Well, quite the community lesson of starting in Burnt Cove with, bringing your lunch to your father and listening to the birds and then sending stuff to the UN on the activism side of things. Mr. Whitaker, any thoughts, either what Sister Mary's saying or just your own jumping off point?
I've had similar experiences. but I suppose when I really started to clue in was with the cod collapse.
Yeah.
Earlier than that, there were things, I knew things were going on because there was a report sometime in the 90s about somebody fishing up around your area of the world who caught a codfish, brought it to the surface, and it was frozen solid. Hello? There's something wrong here, And then with the cod collapse, and I was one of the very few people who said bluntly, this has nothing to do with fishing, overfishing. It has entirely to do with the fish not being able to, the young ones survive and that sort of thing, because if you looked at the numbers, the reproduction rate of, as near as I could tell, for codfish was since 1980 about 1-to-1 instead of the 3-to-1 that people had assumed. And, and this is a very crude look from my viewpoint, wasn't, statistically whatever.
No, and you were cluing into, you're like, look, there's stuff going on in the world. Right?
You start to get a sense of all this interaction, and then I forget who it was, but I think scientists out of Quebec started talking about the disconnect between plankton hatching, zooplankton, which all all those creatures feed on, and the lack of phytoplankton because it was too warm too early, the sun hadn't moved in the appropriate place. So that's all part and parcel of the evidence that was all around us. You know, one of my first teachers at university said, "You can assume what you like," he said, "but the creature is always right." It's telling you something, you know, and what you have to do is try to notice it in the first place and then try to understand it. And I think this is where we're at, and we're unfortunately been late understanding, because this started in the 1890s or something with the Industrial Revolution. I was born just before the war. I never throw anything out. It drives everyone nuts around me. You know, I live in a sea of garbage, you might think. The day I throw it out, of course, is the next day I'll need it. but I reuse everything. I always have. Not because of climate change, because I just felt it was wasteful, you know, not to, and so on. And so I'm trying to figure out how I can fix something because I can't find the part.
Yeah, that little piece of wood that you've had since 1985 in your garage. Tomorrow might be the day you need it, right?
Yeah,
so you never know.
Yeah.
We only have we've got three and a half minutes left as we wind down the conversation that's just flown by here today on climate change. Megs, Leah, any thoughts from you just as we wind down?
Yeah, I think hearing from people who have been around a lot longer than us and hearing about how you guys are involved in the community is really inspiring, because a lot of times it feels like my generation had to hear about climate change from the time we were born, basically.
Yeah.
Like growing up through school, we heard about it a lot. So it's nice to hear that people also care about leaving the earth better than how they found it. Yeah.
Leah, yourself?
I agree. I think we have so much to learn from older folks. As much as we can teach younger people, they can teach us as well. And so to hear about all the meaningful work that they've been doing in their lives, it's really inspiring to hear. So thank you from us for your work.
If I may say one other thing.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to speak up. No, I mean, honestly, there's so many people who repress what they know they should say. And, you know, you've got to raise consciousness around you. If you don't, if it's bottled up inside you, it's not going to help, you know. I mean, I feel part of I suppose in a way, guilty about having failed you people and my own grandchildren, you know, because we didn't get on it. We didn't get, you know, we all had our greedy moments of one sort or another, and so on, and whatever. But, yeah, I think that's where I'll stop.
Okay. Sister Mary, final thoughts from you?
Yes. I think that these young people today bring hope to us. And I am now supporting the Youth Climate Corps and, of course, the Fridays for Future too. But it's just energizing to see and to feel the energy and the good hearts that they have and their determination, and to be able to follow a path that will be sustainable and will be, you know, with so much care. And they're very heart-filled people, and I think they're in the right direction. And I'm very grateful for them. And for people, you know, when you find at university that they're doing these degrees and environmental studies, and there's a new consciousness and there's a new hope. So thank you very much.
Just got a note of thanks from poet Mary Dalton saying thanks for the show today. So, Mary, thank you very much. Folks, thank you for this conversation. And everyone else, thoughts for us, thesignal@cbc.ca. call the signal line and leave a message, 709-576-5260. Tomorrow on the show, it is a Tuesday, late July, folks. It is gardening day. How's that season going? Need some tips? There's going to be a bit of a climate component to tomorrow's show as well. I mean, there is with every gardening day, but specifically tomorrow as well. And, are you reaping the bounty of your efforts in the garden already? Just give us a call. Give us an update. At this point, I think I'm about 25% Swiss chard if you were to kind of dissect me from the amount I'm eating. So anyways, we'll talk about it tomorrow. Cheers.